Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, trudging walk through one of the most cheerless chapters of history. The miserable, bone-chilling winters of medieval peasant life. Imagine waking up on a damp pile of straw, steam rising from the corner, where a pig has been snoring. Your only window is a small hole stuffed with animal fat-soaked linen, meant to block the wind. It doesn't. The roof leaks, the floor squelches, and the chill in your bones feels personal. You're not just cold. You're in an ongoing argument with winter itself. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Maybe your bed isn't so bad after all. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a gray haze. Smoke from last night's hearth still clings to the rafters, and it smells like old soup and scorched wool. There's no such thing as central heating, unless you count huddling near the family goat. Beneath your stiff blanket, which is really just stitched together burlap and wet dreams, your toes are numb. Not figuratively. You genuinely wonder if they're still there. The floor, generously called earth, is a packed mix of mud, old straw, and animal droppings. A layer of crushed reeds attempts to make it walkable, but the damp seeps upward, turning your bedding into a sponge. Historians still argue whether peasants actually slept with their livestock inside the house, or just kept them in an adjoining space. But either way, you hear something snuffling near your head, and it's not your spouse. Your walls are wattle and daub, basically twigs smeared with a mixture of clay, mud, and manure. They keep the wind out like a screen door keeps out smoke. You can feel the chill sneaking through every crack, licking your skin like an icy whisper. Outside it's still dark, and the first sounds of life are soft moans and the groaning of joints. Your family waking up in unison like an old wooden chest creaking open. You sit up, and your joints argue. Everything is stiff. Your knees, your back, your optimism. You slept in your clothes because of course there's only one set. And even then, the wool tunic is damp in weird places, and your socks feel suspiciously crusty. You scratch at a bug bite, or maybe it's just a seam. Hard to tell anymore. The hearth's fire went out during the night, as it always does, unless someone stays up to feed it, which no one did. You fumble with some damp kindling, trying to coax a flame while your breath fogs up in front of your face. The smoke curls upward but has nowhere to go. Chimneys are for rich folks. Your smoke hole just drizzles soot onto the family goose, who honks resentfully. You reach for your shoes, leather maybe, but by now mostly just flaking scraps held together by hope and twine. They reek. Everything reeked back then. That's not poetic exaggeration. Historical records mention medieval stench with alarming frequency. The mix of unwashed bodies, moldy food, and latrine runoff was so bad that nobles carried sweet-smelling herbs just to survive visits to the lower classes. You hear your neighbor coughing through the wall. That's normal. Everybody coughs. It's either a cold, or smoke inhalation, or whatever contagious illness is currently working its way through the village. You'll find out in a week if it was the kind that kills. You stand, stretch, regret it. The roof above you creaks ominously. It's made of thatch, A bunch of reeds layered over and over, sometimes sealed with manure. Cozy, right? Fun fact, thatched roofs were sometimes crawling with bugs, fleas, lice, and even birds' nests. One fringe theory suggests that beds had canopies not for beauty, but for catching all the things that might drop from the roof while you sleep. So tonight, when you look up and see a small black dot moving across the ceiling, maybe just don't think about it. Your kids are awake now. They're silent and shivering, hugging themselves under scraps of blanket. There's no school, no cartoons, just chores, hunger, and the occasional foot race with pneumonia. One of them has a nosebleed. Another is chewing on a strap of old leather like it's jerky. You pat them on the head, if only to check for lice. Standard procedure. You open the door, or flap really, and step outside into the crunch of frozen mud. A gust of wind smacks you like a personal insult. It smells of pine, manure, and chimney smoke. You squint at the low sun behind thick clouds. There's snow, sort of. It's more like frozen sludge. The kind that doesn't reflect light, just absorbs hope. Your neighbor waves from across the yard. He's wearing the same thing he wore yesterday and the day before. His teeth are blue. Not metaphorically, just actually blue. You nod at each other, bonded by a shared understanding. No one has any idea what day it is, and frankly, it doesn't matter. Church on Sunday is the only calendar, and even then, it's just a chance to huddle for warmth and pray that your cough isn't turning into something worse. Behind your hut, smoke rises from the pigsty. You pretend not to notice. That probably means something died in there overnight. But it's too early to care. You'll deal with that after breakfast, which you already suspect won't be exciting, and so your day begins. Not with ambition or inspiration, but with mud between your toes and frost on your eyelashes. Medieval winter doesn't welcome you. It swallows you, slowly and without apology. You slog toward the woodpile, or what used to be the woodpile. Now it's a miserable stack of damp twigs that snap like carrots and hiss instead of burn. Firewood is precious in winter, so precious that stealing it is a full-time medieval crime. There are records of people being whipped, fined, or even mutilated for swiping logs. And yet, here you are, wondering if you should borrow from that one neighbor who looks suspiciously warm these days. Historians still argue whether villages cooperated with communal wood stores or jealously guarded every splinter. You gather a few sticks anyway and return to the hearth. With flint, some angry muttering, and several near-burned fingertips, you coax the kindling into smoky life. Your reward? A thin trickle of heat, and a room that now smells like scorched mold. The smoke rises lazily, curling around the raft. Breakfast is next, which is generous, because it's not a feast. It's more of a heated suggestion. You ladle out some pottage from the pot that's been simmering since last week. It's mostly turnip water now, with a lonely pea floating like it's doing laps. The kids don't complain. They're too busy inhaling steam like it's a snack. You hand out the meal with a wooden spoon that once belonged to your grandmother. There's only one, so you rotate it like a sacred relic. It's considered bad luck to wash it. That's not superstition. It's because washing wastes water and soap. And soap? Made of lye and animal fat. Great for cleaning. Terrible for cracked winter hands. Once the meal is done, and the goose has tried to eat someone's sleeve again. It's time for chores. Winter doesn't mean a break. It just means more suffering in thicker layers. You throw on your cloak, which is basically a patched sack with a neck hole, and brace yourself. Outside, the snow has started again. Light flakes swirling like ashes, settling over mud and hay and misery. You begin your circuit of the homestead. First, the animals. A pig, 2 chickens, and a cow who looks like she's seen things. You check their feed, pat their heads, and break the ice in their water trough with a rock. The pig grunts at you with judgment in its eyes. It knows it's Christmas dinner if things get worse. Then comes the outhouse. Or more accurately, the corner of the yard behind the compost heap. The cold makes everything complicated. Let's just say frostbite becomes an intimate concern. Toilet paper hasn't been invented. You use moss or straw or whatever's least frozen. There's a reason medieval people rarely smiled in portraits, and it's not just the plague. Once back inside, you tackle the clothing situation. Winter. Laundry? Not a thing. Wet clothes are hung near the hearth to dry, which mostly means they become stiff and smoky. Underwear is optional. Baths are rare. Your only option is to rub yourself with a damp cloth and hope for the best. A fringe belief in some parts of medieval Europe held that bathing too often weakened the body's natural resistance to illness. So really, your odor is just preventative health care. Your spouse is spinning wool by the fire, the spindle turning with hypnotic rhythm. The thread breaks. You sigh. That was a whole morning's work. Everything is slow in winter. Every task takes longer than it should. Bread won't rise. Tools crack. Your fingers keep going numb. And always, the wind scratches at the house like it wants in. You take a moment to stare into the fire, zoning out. It's one of the only sources of movement and color in your world. You remember the summer, vaguely. Sun, berries, open fields. It feels like a story someone else told you. Now, everything's gray. The sky, the land, your mood. You haven't seen a plant in months, except for the mold in the corners, which is thriving. Your neighbor stops by, stomping mud from his shoes and offering you half a loaf of bread that's so hard you consider using it as a tool. You trade him a bit of salted fatback that smells like sadness. This is what grocery shopping looks like. Muddy bartering over the last edible scraps. You both stand there quietly for a moment, sharing the warmth of the fire and the unspoken understanding that everything is awful, but you're not dead. Yet. By mid-morning, the kids are restless. They chase each other around the single-room house, screaming until one of them knocks over the bucket of stored rainwater. It soaks the floor. You sigh again, heavier this time. Everything smells like wet socks and stale soup. Again. You send them outside to gather kindling and sweep the yard, but within minutes, they're back, cheeks red and teeth chattering. You wrap them in whatever rags you can find and sit them near the fire, offering crusts of bread like royal snacks. They huddle together, sleepy and silent. You don't know it, but you're performing a nightly ritual shared by thousands of households across Europe. Survival huddling. Lunch is no different from breakfast. More pottage. Slightly less turnip water this time. You toss in a shriveled onion like it's treasure. The smell improves marginally. The taste? still aggressively forgettable. You take a moment to check on your stored supplies. Barrels of root vegetables that are slowly turning into swamp creatures. Sacks of grain that now include a bonus population of weevils. And smoked meat that smells like someone's foot. You poke around, reorganize a bit, and try not to look too closely at the strange fuzz growing on a wedge of cheese. Fringe theory. That fuzz may have made some people mildly hallucinate during famines. So, silver lining? The sun starts to set absurdly early, around 4 o'clock. The light fades fast, and with it, your energy. Candles are rare and precious, so you ration them like magic. Most evenings are spent in darkness, illuminated only by firelight and the occasional flicker of moon through greasy window cloth. Reading isn't an option. You can't read. Almost no peasants could. Storytelling is your TV, so you huddle together, telling tales of forest spirits, saints, and probably something with a talking bear. You drift off mid-sentence. No one notices. Everyone else is already half asleep. The cold deepens with the dark. The fire dims. Your cloak becomes a blanket. You pull the kids close, feeling their tiny feet like icy pebbles. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, you dream of summer, or of bread with actual butter, or of a second tunic. Sleep comes slowly. Not because you're not tired, but because you're trying to keep one ear open for wolves, just in case. Around midnight, you wake shivering. The fire's gone out. Again. You debate whether to rise and rekindle it or just accept your fate and become one with the frost. Your toes have disappeared. Into numbness or another dimension, you're not sure. The baby next to you whimpers in her sleep, her breath fogging the air. You force yourself up, teeth clenched, and shuffle toward the hearth. You grope around, in the dark, for kindling. The embers are dull red, like tired eyes refusing to close. You blow gently, willing them back to life. A spark jumps, a glow spreads. You add a stick, then another. The flames return slowly, reluctantly, like a cat deciding it might come after all. It's warm again, barely, but in the middle of medieval winter, even barely feels like a miracle. You lie back down on the straw mattress that creaks like old bones. It smells of sweat, dirt, and something vaguely rodent-like. You wrap yourself in your cloak, then pull a child's legs off your face. Sleep doesn't return easily. You listen to the wind clawing at the walls, the snore of your spouse, the cough of the sick neighbor drifting through the thin walls like a ghost. Morning arrives without warning, just light and more cold. It's colder than yesterday. You know this because the water bucket has frozen solid. You chip away at it with a knife, then realize the knife's gone dull. Again. Time to sharpen it on the whetstone. Your one remaining luxury after the last one cracked in a frost. Tools are life. A dull blade can mean a lost hand, a ruined meal, or worse. Breakfast is skipped. You're out of pottage. You boil water for tea, but there is no tea. It's just hot water. The kids drink it anyway, grateful for warmth in any form. You promise to go check the trap lines. Maybe there's a rabbit, maybe not. You grab your walking stick and step into the gray, frozen world. The snow has hardened into a crust. Every step is a gamble between sliding or breaking through. The wind bites your face like it holds a grudge. You find the first snare empty. The second one holds something. Not a rabbit. Just a clump of fur and a broken twig. Probably a fox. Stole your dinner. The third trap? Success. A skinny hare, barely more than bones and fur. But meat is meat. You offer a quiet thanks and sling it over your shoulder. Back home, the hearth is still lit. That's a win. You skin the rabbit carefully, trying not to waste a scrap. The children watch hungrily. You boil the bones, add the scraps to whatever is left of last week's cabbage, and call it stew. Everyone eats quietly, reverently. It tastes like salt and relief. You feel like a hero. For 1 hour, you are rich. Later, you mend clothes by the fire, stabbing yourself with the needle every few minutes. Your hands are swollen from cold and work. Your back aches. There's still snow inside your boots, but you keep stitching. Clothes must last. You've worn the same shirt for 4 winters. You're planning on 5. The children are quieter today. Less bickering, more coughing. You press a hand to the smallest one's forehead. It's warm. Too warm. Fever. You crush herbs from your stash. Dried elderflower, a few bitter leaves. You brew a potion that smells like boiled roots in desperation. Will it work? Maybe. Maybe not. But it's what you have. You whisper prayers. You only half believe and sing lullabies from when you were young. The fire crackles. By nightfall, the wind has died. The house is quiet. Too quiet. No neighbors shouting. No distant church bells. Just cold silence. You eat your stew in near darkness, saving the last bit of bread crust for the sick child. You haven't eaten much today. You don't care. As you lie down again, wrapped in your cloak, surrounded by family, you feel a strange peace. You are exhausted, starved, frozen. But you survived. Another day down. Another night to fight through. Another dawn to hope for. Outside, the snow falls again. Silent, soft, and cruel. Inside, a mother whispers a story. A fire flickers, and the world holds still. You wake to the sound of coughing. Not yours this time, but deep, rattling, coming from the older woman next door. Her son shuffles past your doorway, his boots heavy on the frost-bitten ground, shoulders hunched like defeat is already sitting there. He nods at you, barely, and keeps walking toward the woodshed. The church bell rings once in the distance. Not a call to mass. Just a reminder that time is passing and someone, somewhere, probably just died. Your breath fogs the air as you check the sleeping bodies around you. Everyone's still alive. That's more than some families can say. One of the chickens didn't make it through the night, though. Frozen solid in its little coop like a terrible joke. You pluck it quickly, keeping the feathers for stuffing, then toss it into the stew pot before the kids can cry over it. It was a mean chicken anyway. You venture out, bundled like a walking haystack, to see if the local blacksmith has enough scrap to spare a nail or two. Your roof lost another plank during last night's howling tantrum of wind. Inside the smithy, it's warm and smells of scorched iron and tired men. The blacksmith grunts in greeting and slides you a few bent nails. You'll have to hammer them, straight, but that's tomorrow's problem. He offers you a drink. It's mead, but barely. more like fermented hope. You sip it, and it warms your belly, which has done you the favor of going numb from hunger lately. Coldest winter since '93, he mutters. You nod, though you don't remember '93. You were probably too young or too cold to notice. You step back outside, and the light stings your eyes. Not because it's bright, just because it reflects off the snow in a way that feels personal. You pass the baker's home. The smell of bread is maddening. You haven't tasted fresh bread in weeks, maybe months. He might give you a heel if you offer firewood. You make a mental note. The miller's stream is nearly frozen. He's out there. Anyway, poking at it with a stick, muttering. If that wheel stops turning, bread stops happening. If bread stops happening, well, things get medieval real fast. By midday, you're back home, patching the roof. The ladder groans under you, threatening betrayal with every creak. You hammer the nails straight, holding them with freezing fingers, praying not to miss and mash your thumb again. The wind keeps trying to snatch your hat, like winter's own little prankster. You win, barely, and retreat inside victorious, with a patched hole and a story. Your spouse is boiling a new stew, this one made mostly of onions, water, and the illusion of meat. The children aren't fooled, but they eat it. They always do. It's either stew or nothing. One of them asks when the sun's coming back. You don't have the heart to say not for weeks, maybe months, maybe not at all, if the clouds have anything to say about it. Later, you chop more firewood. It's always firewood, always chopping, always stacking, always thinking about whether you have enough to get through just one more week. Your back is wrecked, your hands cracked open like old bark, but you keep going. Because nobody else will, and because cold doesn't wait. You think about what warmth used to feel like, really feel like. A bath, maybe. You've forgotten what that feels like. You haven't taken one in. Let's not even go there. People didn't bathe often in these times. Not because they liked being dirty, but because water was frozen, firewood was precious, and nobody had time to luxuriously soak in anything except misery. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants bathed more than we assume, or if they simply smelled like onion soup and foot problems. Either way, you can't smell yourself anymore. That's probably a good sign, or a very bad one. You wrap your youngest in the last good blanket and tuck a hot stone near their feet. You smile as they sigh in relief, eyes fluttering shut. It's moments like this, tiny, quiet ones, that make the cold survivable. Tonight, your spouse reads from a book. Not everyone in the village can read, but somehow they learned. Maybe from a priest or a traveling scholar who once took pity. The book's pages are worn, words fading, but the stories are still there. Knights, dragons, saints who survived worse winters than this. Maybe, maybe not, but the stories help. You fall asleep to the sound of their voice, and for a moment, it almost feels like a different life. The morning frost doesn't wait for you to wake. It creeps in through every crack, curling itself around your ankles, biting your nose and settling into your bones like it's claiming ownership. You stretch or try to, but every joint protests. The aches aren't new. They're the kind of familiar you don't bother complaining about anymore. Outside, the sky is the same dull gray as yesterday and the day before. No sun. Just an endless, Moody ceiling of ice-colored silence. You get dressed while still under your blanket, a trick you've mastered over the years. The shirt is stiff with cold. The trousers make you flinch. But you're up. That's already winning. Your spouse is tending the fire. What's left of it anyway? Last night's embers are nearly dead, so they fan, feed, and whisper curses, until the flames wake up groggy and reluctant, like a hungover dragon. You chew on yesterday's bread. It's hard enough to break a tooth, but you soak it in broth and pretend it's fresh. Your teeth thank you by not cracking. The children are quieter this morning. That kind of silence means they're either tired, cold, or both. You hand the oldest a task, gather kindling, and send the middle one to check on the neighbor who hasn't been seen since the blizzard rolled through 2 days ago. You don't expect good news. You trudge into the village center, boots crunching through, packed snow. The cobbler's out front, trying to repair a boot using a rusted needle and 2 frozen fingers. Any word on the grain? You ask him. He snorts. Same as yesterday, not enough to feed a pig. The winter tax was high this year. Too high. The Lord claimed it was for repairs on his manor roof. You've never seen his roof, or his manor. Just the men who show up with ledgers and spears. Historians still argue whether medieval lords truly understood the desperation they caused, or if they simply didn't care. In your world, it makes no difference. Understanding won't fill your stew pot. You spend the next hour helping a neighbor dig out her door. It was buried in snowdrift, and she's too old to manage it alone. Her house smells like mildew and cabbage. You try not to gag. She offers you a crust of cheese so hard it could cut glass. You take it, thank her, and pocket it. It might soften by spring. Someone's goat gave birth this morning. Too early in the season, poor thing. The baby's weak, its little legs like twigs, but it's alive. Everyone gathers for a minute, hopeful. A living thing. A sign. Then someone mutters it'll probably die tonight, and just like that, the hope is gone. Still, the goat owner wraps it up in wool and keeps it close, just in case. Back home, your spouse has news. The neighbor passed, in his sleep. No suffering. You nod. Another one gone. He wasn't young, but still. It hits you like a falling beam. Quiet deaths are the loudest in winter. There'll be a burial tomorrow, if the ground's soft enough to dig. If not, well, let's not think about that. You spend the afternoon mending clothes. The children's cloaks are threadbare, the socks nearly translucent. You repurpose what you can, patching holes with bits of sackcloth and old rags. A neighbor lends you a darning needle. You return it with a thank you and a lump of animal fat. Almost currency in this cold. There's a knock at the door. It's the local reeve, looking for volunteers to haul timber from the Lord's forest. As you drag sled loads of splintering pine through snow, you think about summer, about warmth, about walking barefoot through grass that isn't frozen into dagger points. You think about your childhood, chasing geese and eating apples straight from the tree. Were those your memories? Or stories you've half inherited from someone else? There's a quirky theory, still debated, that peasants used to stuff straw into their clothing to stay warm, like walking scarecrows. You tried it once. The itching nearly drove you mad, but it helped. Now you keep a little straw lining in. Your boots, your feet are grateful, mostly. By dusk your shoulders are screaming. Your hands are raw. The reward for your labor? a small pouch of barley, and half a smile from the steward. You mutter a blessing under your breath so quiet even God has to strain to hear it. Then you go home. Your youngest is singing, a nonsense song, made up on the spot, about a chicken who became queen of the snow people. You laugh. Everyone laughs. Not because it's that funny, but because you need to. The laughter feels almost warm. Dinner is the same stew, same as ever. But someone found a turnip, and that makes it different. Exotic even. You eat slowly, savoring it like royalty. As the wind howls and night settles over the thatched roofs, you tuck your family in and place a candle stub in the window. Not for light, but for hope. For remembering that even in all this ice, the flame still flickers. Morning comes again, and it's even colder, if that's possible. The frost has crept inside, this time icing the rim of your water jug and turning your breath into clouds before your eyes have even fully opened. Your blanket stuck to your body, stiff with overnight damp. You peel it away slowly, teeth already chattering before your feet hit the frozen dirt floor. The candle stub burned out in the night. You'd hoped it would last till dawn, just to keep the shadows at bay. But no such luck. Still, no one froze. You count heads. Everyone's breathing. That's a win. Outside, your world is locked in white silence. Snow muffles every sound, making even the chickens tiptoe. The path to the well is crusted over again, and someone will have to hack through the ice to draw water. It's your turn. You wrap your cloak tighter, kiss your children's heads, and grab the iron pick you share with 3 neighbors. You chip, and chip, and chip. Historians still argue whether medieval villages had any consistent water purification, or if you all just developed stomachs tougher than boiled leather. You're inclined to believe it's the latter. After all, you've drunk worse than this. As you haul the bucket up, your hands scream at you. The water is freezing, literally, but your family needs it. You carry it back like it's gold, and, in some ways, it is. Without this, there's no food, no warmth, no life. Today is the burial. The old man who died yesterday gets his final walk, drag, through the village. 6 men carry him on a sled, wrapped in linen. No casket, no prayers, not with the priest still snowed in 3 villages away. Just quiet nods and a few muttered blessings. You follow, mostly because it's what people do. Death brings the village together, even if just for a few minutes. The burial spot isn't easy to dig. The ground is like iron. They use metal rods to break through the frost layer, then pickaxes, then shovels. It takes hours. You help, even though your arms ache from yesterday's timber hauling. A cold wind bites at your neck, and snow begins to fall again. Just light flakes, drifting like ash. Finally, there's a hole. It's shallow but deep enough to cover the body. The sled tips. The linen bundle slides in. No one says much, just a few coughs and shuffling feet. Then you all take turns with a shovel, covering the old man bit by bit until he's gone, buried in winter's unyielding grip. Back home, you don't speak for a while. Your spouse hands you broth. Not soup, just broth. Warm liquid that smells like onion and fatigue. You drink it slowly, eyes staring out at nothing. The kids sense the mood. They play quietly, One of them draws pictures in the soot on the hearthstone. Stick figures, a dog, a sun with an angry face. You pretend not to notice the tears welling in your eyes. Later, someone knocks. It's that strange neighbor, the one who talks to birds and once claimed a ghost stole her left boot. She's holding a bowl of honey, real honey. You stare at it like she's holding a crown. "It's from my hive," she says. "Thought your little ones could use a treat." You blink. Beekeeping? In this weather, there's a quirky, little-known fact that some medieval peasants kept hives inside their cottages during harsh winters, hanging them near chimneys to keep the bees alive. You thought it was a myth. Apparently not. You accept the bowl like it's holy. She winks and vanishes back into the snow. The honey doesn't last long, just a dollop each, spread thin on flatbread. But the taste? It explodes in your mouth. Like sunshine. Your kids actually laugh out loud. The day winds on. You spend part of it repairing the roof, again. A new leak formed near the back corner, dripping icy water right onto the bedding. You curse softly as you patch it with moss, cloth, and hope. The wind whistles overhead, sounding like it's mocking you. At twilight, the neighbors gather to share news. Someone's cow is sick. Someone else saw footprints near the storehouse that didn't belong to anyone local. Wolves, thieves, no one knows. Tension coils in your chest. But there's nothing to be done tonight. You huddle inside, lock the door, and reinforce it with an old cart axle, just in case. The wind picks up as night falls. The cottage groans under its weight. You lie close together, the family burritoed under layers of cloth, wool, and old rabbit. Pelts. Someone passes gas. Everyone laughs. That's life. Historians still debate how often families shared one bed, one room, one everything. But if you're living it, there's no debate. You just do what keeps you alive. Your youngest mumbles something half asleep. Will it be spring soon? You stroke their hair and lie. Soon, little one. You wake up to screaming. Not the terrifying kind, just the irritating, high-pitched, somebody is fighting over a turnip kind. Still, it's enough to yank you from dreams of warm bread and an actual mattress. You groan, throw the cloak off, and shuffle toward the door. Outside, the neighbor's kids are brawling. One has a bloody nose. The other is holding what looks like half a carrot and all the rage in the world. You settle the dispute like any true wintertime mediator, by confiscating the carrot and threatening both of them with manure duty if they keep it up. They grumble, but quiet down. Crisis averted. Inside, breakfast is the same as yesterday. Porridge if you're generous, and boiled oats if you're honest. It's bland, clumpy, and sticks to your teeth like regret. But it fills the stomach, which is more than some can say, this time of year. Historians still argue whether winter food shortages were due more to poor planning or unavoidable climate shifts. Either way, you're the one staring down a dwindling grain sack with 7 mouths to feed and a mouse that clearly isn't afraid of you. The trick to surviving winter hunger is distraction. You pretend you're full. You chew slowly. Your kids laugh at the idea of eating dirt soup, which you're only half joking might be next on the menu. Today's chores unglamorous but necessary. Mending. Clothes, shoes, roof, relationships. You name it. It probably needs fixing. You sit near the hearth with your needle and twine, patching a sleeve that's more whole than fabric. Your fingers are numb, so the work is slow. You prick yourself 3 times before you even start sewing. Your spouse works beside you, twisting broken netting back into shape. It's not fishing season, but repairing gear is a winter pastime. Plus, it beats standing outside and freezing your eyebrows off. You both work quietly, every so often exchanging a glance that says, "Still alive?" and "Barely." Did you know some peasants in harsher regions stuffed their clothes with hay to stay warm? Not straw. Hay. A more refined kind of itchy. It's not a fashion statement, unless the look you're going for is scarecrow chic. By midday, the air starts to shift. It's subtle, but you feel it. A softness in the wind. A smell that isn't just soot and cold. Maybe something is melting somewhere. Or maybe it's your imagination trying to trick you into hope. Still, you use it as an excuse to go outside and walk the edge of the forest. You check the snares you set days ago. Nothing. Not even a tuft of fur. Animals are smarter than people give them credit for. You haven't seen a rabbit in a week, and the last squirrel you caught was so thin, your kid asked if it was a very large rat. You sit on a stump for a moment. Just sit. Let the wind touch your face. Let your thoughts wander. Then you hear it, singing, faint, distant, but real. You follow the sound, stepping carefully through the crunching snow. Around the bend, past the collapsed fence post, you see her. One of the elder women, standing in the field, singing to the frozen earth. She's pouring warm water onto a patch of soil and whispering something you can't quite hear. Historians still debate whether medieval singing rituals to wake the ground were rooted in superstition or old folk religion. But right now, it doesn't matter. It's a little insane. And somehow, it's the most hopeful thing you've seen in weeks. You don't interrupt her. Just watch. Then turn and head back. Later, you gather branches to make more torches. You bundle them with strips of old fabric dipped in leftover animal fat. Lighting is a luxury, but also a security measure. Things lurk in the dark, some real, some imagined, all unpleasant. That night, your stomach aches from too much turnip and not enough anything else. But your kids are giggling. One of them made a puppet from an old sock and is putting on a play about a magical cow who farts gold. It's ridiculous. It's glorious. You laugh harder than you have in days. There's a quirky fact that some medieval villagers genuinely believed cows could be bewitched to produce beer or even butter straight into buckets. You're not sure what's more magical, beer cows or this sock puppet moment. The laughter softens the edges of the cold. For a little while, it's almost warm inside. And then, it's bath time. Yes. In winter. Yes, it's just once a week. Yes, it's in the same barrel you use to ferment cabbage in the spring. You heat water over the fire, pour it in, and take turns. Youngest to oldest. It's awkward, weirdly intimate, and oddly bonding. The water gets progressively less clear with each person. By the time it's your turn, it's more of a broth. You go quickly. Scrub what matters. Dunk. Shiver. Dry off with a cloth that's slightly less wet than you are. Afterward, you all sit close to the fire. Hair dripping, skin tingling, faces pink from warmth. There's a kind of peace in that circle. You made it through another day. You think of that woman in the field, singing to the soil. And for just a second, you wonder, maybe it's listening. You wake to the sound of something scratching, not an animal, at least not one with fur. It's the wind, dragging a loose branch against the roof like a bony finger across a coffin lid. Charming. Still, better than being woken by shouting again. You roll over and pull the blanket tighter, trying to pretend that the cold seeping in through every crack is just your imagination. Eventually, you give in. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. Well, wooden plank with hay if we're being honest, and immediately regret it. Your toes curl as they hit the frozen ground. Somewhere deep in your soul, you hear the faint scream of every warm memory you've ever had. Outside, the sky's the kind of gray that promises snow, but delivers mostly disappointment. Everything's frozen. The ground, the water bucket, even the laundry you forgot to bring in last night. Your shirt now stands up on its own. Fancy. Breakfast? The same as always. You eye the grain barrel like it might spontaneously refill if you squint hard enough. It doesn't. Instead, you scoop the last few handfuls of rye and oats and toss them in the pot. You add water. Then more water. Then some hope. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers suffered more from actual starvation or malnutrition during winter months. Either way, you're pretty sure this gruel qualifies as both. After eating, you brace yourself for today's big adventure, chopping wood. The good trees were felled weeks ago, which means now you're stuck scavenging for brittle, barkless scraps that refuse to split without a fight. You stomp through snow, pulling your cloak around you, cursing the frost that keeps biting your fingers even through your mittens. Mittens, by the way, are just wool sacks tied at the wrist. Functional? Barely. Fashionable. Only if frostbite blue is your color. You reach the copse of trees near the edge of the village, where others have already started their morning routines. One man is swinging an axe like he's arguing with the tree. A woman nearby is dragging a bundle of branches the size of her entire body. You nod to them both and get to work. It's exhausting. The wood is stubborn, and every swing rattles through your bones. You pause often, pretending to examine the axe, but really just catching your breath. Someone offers you a drink of warm ale. You accept, because it's warm, and frankly, there's not much else to celebrate today. Here's a weird tidbit. In some villages, people believed that the trees could feel pain, and you were supposed to apologize before chopping them. You try it, half-jokingly, whispering, "Sorry, tree. It doesn't make the wood split any easier, but at least you feel polite." By midday, you've collected enough to keep the hearth burning through the evening. Maybe. You hope. You drag your bundle home, back aching, feet numb, hands blistered. When you finally set the logs beside the fire, you allow yourself a small moment of triumph. Firewood. 1. You. Technically not dead. The afternoon is mercifully quiet. Most people retreat indoors around this time, too tired or too cold to keep busy. You take the chance to check on your stored supplies. Root cellar. Still musty. Turnips. Shrinking by the day. Beans. Might be pebbles at this point. You sigh. There's ongoing debate among scholars about how peasants managed food preservation. Some argue they used ash pits, while others believe salt was too expensive to waste on vegetables. You've tried both. Let's just say the ash pit method leaves a smoky aftertaste, and salted cabbage just makes people grumpy. Your neighbor stops by with a trade offer. 2 onions for one of your candles. You hesitate. The onions could save a meal, but that candle might save a toe. In the end, you barter half the candle. You're not stupid. You sit and peel one of the onions slowly, letting the sharp scent sting your nose. It's weirdly comforting, like a reminder that your senses still work, that you're still here. As night falls, the temperature drops faster than your enthusiasm. You stack the fire high, hoping it'll last. You even pull out one of the fancy logs, the kind that burns fast and hot. You save those for nights when it's just too much. Like tonight. Someone suggests a story to pass the time. Your eldest starts one about a fox who outsmarts a cruel miller. It's clearly a revenge fantasy wrapped in animal fur. Everyone laughs at the part where the fox dumps flour on the miller's head and steals his shoes. Even your grumpy uncle chuckles. Progress. Did you know some medieval tales featured talking animals as a safe way to criticize authority without getting accused of heresy? Basically, foxes were the medieval version of anonymous Twitter accounts. You finish the story and huddle closer, sharing warmth, sharing silence. Outside, the wind howls again. Maybe angry you used a good log. Maybe just showing off. The candle you traded half of is burning now. You watch the flame flicker. It makes shadows on the wall, soft and dancing. Almost magical. You lean back. Your body heavy but your mind light. Somehow you made it through another day. You're not sure what time it is. Somewhere between too dark to see and too cold to sleep. You lie there, half dreaming, half listening. The fire crackles, then fades. Someone nearby coughs. The dog snores, twitching its paws like it's chasing ghost rabbits. You shuffle out of bed again. Nature's call waits for no one. Not even when the chamber pot is colder than betrayal. You grit your teeth and get it over with, then crawl back under the blanket like a burrowing animal trying to survive an avalanche. Every movement is a negotiation with the cold. Morning sneaks up, without asking, draping the room in a pale blue hush. You sit up, groaning softly. Your breath mists in the air. Another lovely medieval Tuesday. You dress in the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before. Your winter outfit isn't really a wardrobe. It's more like a crust. Layers of linen. You trudge down to the river with a few neighbors, frozen clothes bundled over your shoulder. The water is painfully cold, with chunks of ice drifting past like tiny insults. You chop a hole near the bank and prepare for battle. Laundry is medieval, CrossFit. You dip, scrub, wring, repeat. Your knuckles turn red, your arms ache, your fingers threaten mutiny. One woman next to you sings a hymn under her breath. You're not sure if it's for rhythm or sanity. Historians still argue whether peasants actually laundered full garments in winter, or simply beat the dirt out dry style and aired them for days. Right now, you're doing both, hoping the mixture of cold and muscle strain doesn't snap your spine like a twig. Still, there's something kind of meditative about it. The rhythm, the breathing, the way your mind drifts. Plus, there's gossip. The old woman with the crooked teeth mutters that the Reeves' son has been sneaking into the bakery at night. You file that one away for warmth later. Back home, the laundry gets hung by the fire, or wherever it won't freeze solid. You try not to drip on the dog. He glares at you, as if you're the reason the world is frosty and cruel. Fair enough. Lunch is what remains of last night's soup, now upgraded with onion. Your spoon clinks against the bottom of the bowl too soon. Your stomach accepts it like an overworked employee getting half a paycheck. At least it's something. Weird tidbit time. In some places, people rubbed onions on their feet before bed to draw out illness. You tried it once. All it drew out was complaints from everyone within sniffing distance. The afternoon brings a new challenge. Repairing the roof. A few tiles blew off last week, and now snow's been creeping in like a nosy neighbor. You climb up with care, the thatch squishy in places where it really shouldn't be. Balancing on slick beams while stuffing straw between gaps is not your idea of a good time. It's like playing Jenga, except if you lose, you fall into the pig pen. And yes, your pig is watching. Judging. By the time the patchwork is done, you're drenched in sweat under your layers, but still shivering. You stomp. Down, fingers numb, knees creaky. A few snowflakes drift lazily through the air like nature's confetti for your survival. Inside, someone's baking flatbread on a stone by the fire. You tear off a piece before it's cool, burning your fingers and not even caring. The taste of something warm and fresh is worth every blister. You finally sit, back pressed against the wall, stretching your legs out toward the fire. The flames spit and hiss, and you pretend they're applauding you for still being upright. You deserve it. The younger kids are playing with scraps of cloth and carved twigs, pretending they're knights or merchants. One declares she's the queen and demands taxes in the form of acorns. You roll your eyes but hand one over. Long live the acorn queen. A distant bell rings. The monastery, probably. Or someone practicing how to make noise without meaning. Hard to tell. But the sound stretches across the village like a thread of routine, connecting everyone for just a moment. As the sky darkens again, so does the world outside your door. Wolves have been spotted near the forest edge. You check the bolt on the door twice. The sheep are penned, the tools inside, the firewood stacked. You've done what you can. The rest is up to luck. Historians still argue whether wolf attacks were common or just the stuff of scary winter tales told to keep children close. You'd rather not find out firsthand. You huddle close to the fire, your shoulders brushing those beside you. Warmth is a group project now. You don't speak much. You don't need to. The silence is comfortable, tired, peaceful in its own chilly, smoky way. You fall asleep with the faint smell of ash and bread in your nose. Your dreams filled with dancing animals, heroic onions, and an endless supply of dry socks. You wake slowly, the cold pressing against your skin like an unwelcome guest who refuses to leave. The light outside has a gray, hesitant quality, like the morning itself is shivering. You pull your threadbare blanket tighter and remember that medieval peasants didn't have heated mattresses, electric blankets, or even enough hay to build a decent nest. Just straw, dirt floors, and the occasional hope that the fire didn't die overnight. Today's chore is gathering firewood. a job that feels less like a task and more like a punishment handed down by some cruel winter deity. You wrap your woolen cloak tighter, the rough fabric biting at your neck, and step outside into the brittle air. The village is silent except for the crunch of frozen snow beneath your boots and the occasional caw of a raven, probably as miserable as you are. The forest looms nearby, a patchwork of leafless branches that scratch the sky like skeletal fingers. You know wolves and worse things roam here, but you can't afford to be picky. The winter will bite you harder if the firewood runs out. Mainstream fact. Peasants spent an enormous amount of their energy just staying warm and fed during the cold months. Fuel scarcity was a real soul-crushing problem. You find a fallen branch, heavier than it looks, and haul it back to the village with a grunt. Your muscles protest, but the cold makes your blood pump a little faster, a tiny victory in itself. On the way back, you notice something odd, a faint smoke curling up from a distant chimney. Not yours. Not the neighbor's either. More like a signal or a secret. You tuck that thought away because today is about survival, not mysteries. Quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed that certain forest animals, like foxes or owls, could transform into witches during the coldest nights. You've heard old Thomas mumble about seeing glowing eyes in the woods, and swear the creatures were more than just animals. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were mere superstition, or a coded way peasants explained real dangers. They couldn't understand. Back at the hut, you stack the wood carefully. One wet log could ruin the whole fire, so you test each piece with a sniff and a tap, like a wood detective. The day drags on, filled with small tasks, mending clothes, patching holes in the walls, and feeding the few animals that survive the winter's bite. Your fingers are stiff, almost numb, but you keep working. Complaining is a luxury for the well-fed, and you're anything but. Mid-afternoon, the Reeves' son stumbles into the village, his breath visible in the air, cheeks red from the cold. He carries a sack of grain, the result of a rare trade with a nearby manor. It's not much, but it's enough to stave off the worst hunger pangs for a day or two. You watch him pass, thinking about how the rigid social ladder traps you all. Serfs to lords, poor to poorer, cold to colder. The evening brings a rare treat, a communal supper by the hearth. Everyone brings what little they can spare. Some salted pork, a handful of dried herbs, a chunk of cheese that's more moldy than edible. You share laughs, stories, and the warmth of togetherness, a fragile shield against the night's cruelty. Your stomach may grumble louder than the fire, but here, in this circle of flickering faces, you find a sliver of comfort. The night deepens, and the cold creeps back in through the cracks in the walls. You wrap yourself in your cloak and listen to the village settle into sleep. The wind moans, like a forgotten ghost outside. Somewhere, a child stirs and whispers a prayer to keep nightmares at bay. You close your eyes, your breath slow and steady. Tomorrow promises the same endless battle. But tonight, you have this small sanctuary. A momentary pause before the struggle resumes. Historians still argue how much peasants relied on communal support versus individual resilience during winter hardship. Either way, survival was never a solo act. The morning light creeps in faintly through the cracks in your hut. softening the edges of the frost clinging stubbornly to the window. You shift beneath your thin blanket, feeling the chill settle deep in your bones. Winter is relentless, and every breath you take seems to carry a shard of ice. You know the day will demand strength you're not sure you have, but there's no choice. Dawn waits for no one, especially not a medieval peasant. You push yourself up, the rough wooden floor cold against your feet. Outside, the village is still quiet, but you hear the distant clatter of carts on frozen paths. Someone's fetching water from the well, a chore that, in this weather, feels like a pilgrimage to the center of the world's misery. Water freezes quickly, and so does hope. Mainstream fact: water sources were a major challenge during winter. Wells could freeze solid, forcing peasants to haul heavy buckets from rivers or ponds, risking frostbite. You bundle yourself up and head out, the air biting your cheeks and nose. Snow crunches underfoot, and the sky hangs low and gray. You catch sight of old Marjorie, wrapped in layers that look like they've survived several winters, balancing a bucket in one hand and a lantern in the other. Her face is lined with stories you'll never hear, but you nod respectfully. No need for words when the cold says enough. As you approach the frozen river, you remember a peculiar fact someone told you. In some villages, when the ice got thick, enough, peasants would carve out holes and fish through the ice, hoping to catch enough to last the week. It sounds like a miraculous trick, or a desperate gamble. Quirky tidbit. Some folk believed that the river itself held a spirit who controlled the fish, and leaving offerings on the ice would ensure a good catch. Maybe it's just superstition, or maybe it's hope dressed up as ritual. Historians still argue whether these rituals were spiritual, or simply early attempts at managing scarce resources through tradition and community bonding. You try your luck with the fishing line, sitting low on a wooden stump. The cold numbs your fingers as you wait, the silence broken only by the occasional crack of ice shifting. It feels endless, but every tug on the line sparks a small thrill, a brief escape from the monotony of survival. After an hour, you manage to catch a small fish, its silver scales glinting weakly in the pale light. It won't feed you long, but it's something. A tiny victory against the cold. Walking back, you notice how the village animals crowd closer to the fires, their breath visible in the air. You catch a glimpse of the village dog, scruffy and thin, sneaking scraps from a neighbor's hearth. He looks like he's seen better winters too. The day unfolds slowly, a blend of chores and quiet moments. You patch holes in your cloak, stitch worn shoes, and share a rare laugh with a neighbor who tells a joke about the Lord's overstuffed belly and his uncanny ability to avoid any real work. Type amen if you've ever found humor in hard times. It's the best kind of warmth. By late afternoon, the sky darkens early, the heavy clouds ready to spill snow again. You gather wood scraps and kindling, adding them carefully to the fire. It sputters and pops, casting flickering shadows that dance like restless spirits along the walls. Dinner is a simple stew. Roots, dried beans, and the fish you caught. It smells earthy and faintly smoky. You savor the warmth spreading through your chest. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually ate meat often during winter, or if it was mostly beans and root vegetables due to scarcity and expense. Either way, the stew tastes like survival. As night falls, you retreat to your corner, the sounds of the village settling around you. You think back to the river spirit, the fox witch tales, and the shared struggles that bind you to this place, this cold, this life. The fire's glow softens, and your eyelids grow heavy. Tomorrow will come, relentless as ever. But for now, the night holds a fragile peace. The pre-dawn cold wraps around you like a suffocating shroud, relentless and unforgiving. Your breath hangs in the air, a brief cloud that disappears before it can even form. You're up early again, the fire's warmth long since faded, and the chores waiting, as insistent as the frost gripping the village. There's no luxury in delay, especially in these final brutal months of winter. Outside, the world is a monochrome of grays and whites. The frozen earth crunches beneath your boots as you trudge toward the fields, where once fertile soil now lies buried under a thick crust of ice and snow. The tools you carry are simple: a wooden hoe, a spade with a cracked handle. It's more a ritual than real farming this time of year, a way to keep your muscles from turning to stone. Mainstream fact: winter farming was almost non-existent. Most peasants relied on stored food and took on other labor to survive, like repairing fences or tending animals. As you near the edge of the field, you spot a thin figure hunched over a small patch where the snow has melted slightly. It's the village herbalist, collecting what little medicinal plants she can find. You know these plants are precious, healing and comforting, if scarce. Quirky tidbit: some peasants believed that certain herbs harvested during winter held special powers against evil spirits, especially those gathered at dawn on the coldest days. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were deeply spiritual or simply practical ways to encourage harvesting at optimal times. You exchange a brief nod with the herbalist before continuing your walk. The air is sharp and biting, but there's a faint smell of smoke and roasting chestnuts wafting from a nearby manor. You imagine the lord sitting by blazing fireplaces, the contrast to your own thin walls stinging like a slap. In the village, the animals are restless. Chickens huddle under makeshift shelters, pigs dig for scraps beneath the snow, and the oxen stamp their feet, trying to stay warm. You help lead a small group of cattle to a sheltered area, careful to avoid the patches of ice where they might slip. The afternoon drags on, filled with mending clothes and weaving baskets. Simple tasks that keep your hands busy and your mind from drifting into darker thoughts. You remember the old stories about winter being the domain of frost giants and ice witches lurking just beyond the trees. It's hard not to wonder if they're real or just shadows cast by fear. As dusk approaches, you join the villagers gathered near the communal oven. Everyone waits their turn to bake bread, the warm aroma a rare treat. You hold your piece of dough carefully, feeling its coldness against your fingers, and try to imagine it rising in the heat, growing into something nourishing. Historians still argue how often peasants actually had fresh bread in winter, given the limited resources and oven availability. Most often, it was dense, coarse, and more survival than delight. Night falls, and the temperature drops even further. You huddle closer to the fire, the crackling flames a small defiance against the cold. Conversations drift to plans for spring, the promise of thaw, and the memories of summers that seem like distant dreams. You close your eyes briefly and hear the wind's mournful song outside, a lullaby for those who endure. The biting wind howls outside, rattling the thin shutters of your hut and sneaking through the smallest cracks. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, the weight of the cold pressing on your chest like a heavy stone. There's a rhythm to these endless winter nights, dark, cold, and seemingly unchanging. But you've learned to find small moments of warmth amid the hardship. You sit by the fire, stirring a pot of watery porridge. It's bland, barely filling, but the heat from the bowl seeps into your hands, a reminder that even the smallest comforts count. You watch the flames dance, imagining they're brighter, stronger than they really are. Maybe it's a trick of the mind, or maybe hope itself flickers in the firelight. Mainstream fact: medieval peasants often subsisted on a monotonous diet during winter. Porridge, bread, and whatever root vegetables they could store, with meat a rare luxury. Outside, the village is quiet. The snow muffles footsteps, and the only sounds are the occasional creaks of wood contracting in the cold and the distant bark of a dog. You think about the isolation winter brings, not just physical, but social. Visits between neighbors become rare, and loneliness creeps in like the frost beneath the door. Quirky tidbit: some peasants believe that talking to their livestock during these long months kept them, and themselves, from going mad, like a secret language between souls trapped by winter's grip. Historians still argue whether such practices were merely coping mechanisms or had deeper spiritual significance. Your thoughts drift to the village celebrations that once marked the turn of the year. Feasts, music, dancing by torchlight. Those memories feel like relics from another life. Now such gatherings are few and far between, and the cold makes merriment a risky affair. You hear a soft knock at your door. It's old Jeb, the village carpenter, stopping by with a small bundle of kindling and a flask of ale. The gesture feels heavy with unspoken kindness. Little acts like this stitch the fraying fabric of community during harsh times. Together, you share a quiet moment by the fire, the ale warming your insides and the kindling promising a brighter blaze. Outside, the snow continues to fall, a silent curtain between you and the world. The night deepens, and your eyes grow heavy. You think about the endurance needed to face another winter day, the strength in the mundane, and the dawn creeps in slowly, pale and hesitant, as if reluctant to disturb the frozen silence outside. You rise from your straw mattress, joints stiff from the cold night. Your breath forms little clouds in the air, and you quickly pull on your worn woolen garments, layered in the hope of keeping the relentless chill at bay. The day ahead promises little relief, but routine offers a certain comfort in its predictability. You step outside and immediately feel the crunch of frost-hardened earth beneath your boots. The village is wrapped in a stillness broken only by the distant crow of a rooster, struggling against the cold to announce a new day. You move toward the stable to tend the animals, your fingers numb but practiced. Their breath steams in the frigid air, and the low hum of life is a small comfort against the vast cold. Mainstream fact. Animal husbandry was vital for peasants' survival, providing not only food, but essential labor for spring planting. You check the feed, break the ice in the water trough, and whisper soft words to the animals. A ritual that feels as much about keeping your own spirits warm as theirs. The lean cows and horses look back at you with a mix of dependence and quiet resilience. Quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed that animals could sense the coming of spring before humans, often noticing subtle changes in behavior during the coldest months. Historians still argue whether such beliefs reflected early ecological observations or were simply myths born of hope. By mid-morning, the weak sunlight struggles through the clouds, casting a pale glow on snow-covered fields. You know, the ground beneath is still frozen solid, too hard for any real work. So instead, you join others repairing tools, weaving baskets, and patching roofs. A testament to the endless cycle of preparation and survival. The smell of smoked meat from a neighbor's chimney drifts over, and you feel a pang of envy mingled with gratitude for what little you have. The year's reserves are running low, and every crumb counts. In the quiet moments, your mind wanders to the legends passed down by the elders. Tales of ancient winters when the cold was so fierce. Entire villages vanished beneath the ice. You shake off the shiver, partly from cold, partly from imagination. As afternoon wanes, the village children, bundled in patched coats, venture out to play on frozen ponds, their laughter brittle but bright. You smile at their resilience, a flicker of warmth in the relentless winter gloom. As twilight settles over the village, the sky a deep indigo fading into black, you prepare for the long night ahead. The cold has seeped into every corner of your home, but the hearth's dying embers still hold a fragile glow. You gather what little remains of dry wood, feeding the fire carefully, mindful that this small flame is your last line against the creeping chill. Your hands move with practiced care, setting a pot of broth to simmer, filling the room with a faint, savory aroma that momentarily lifts the weight of hunger and cold. The familiar sounds of the village at night, the occasional cough, the soft clink of tools being put away, the distant howl of a lone wolf, create a symphony of endurance. It's a reminder that you are not alone in this frozen wilderness. Mainstream fact. Winter nights were the longest and hardest for medieval peasants, often spent in cramped, drafty huts with minimal heating. You pull a threadbare blanket closer and sink onto your mattress of straw, eyes tracing the flickering shadows on the walls. Memories of summer days feel like distant dreams, fields green and ripe, the buzz of bees, the warm sun on your face. But for now, the cold rules, and your world is one of survival. Quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed that wearing a piece of iron or a garlic clove around their neck could protect them from evil spirits thought to be more active in the dead of winter. Historians still argue whether such superstitions had deeper psychological roots or were simply cultural holdovers from pagan beliefs. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying with it a whisper of snow. You close your eyes, listening to the rhythm of the storm beginning. Anew, the sound oddly soothing after a day so harsh. The cold has a way of sharpening the senses, making every crackle and creak feel magnified in the silence. You think about the cycle that will soon turn, how the snow will melt, the earth will thaw, and life will push through the frost again. Until then, you endure. You survive. The fire flickers low. Your breath slows. The cold outside seems a little less fierce when held inside the warmth of memories and the promise of spring. The night deepens, and you feel the day's weariness settle gently over your body like a soft, heavy blanket. Your mind slows, thoughts drifting like snowflakes falling silently to rest. The chill of the day fades into a distant hum, and you breathe slowly, deeply, as the warmth inside you grows. Imagine the quiet village, nestled beneath a thick quilt of snow, the stars overhead twinkling faintly through the cold night sky. Here, in this stillness, you find a place to rest, a small sanctuary where time stretches and softens. The hardship of the cold, the long months spent in shadow, begin to melt away in the calm embrace of night. You are safe, wrapped in the gentle glow of the hearth, held by the enduring spirit of those who have come before you. Let your thoughts float like the gentle flicker of the firelight, steady and slow. Tomorrow will come, with its own trials and hopes. For now, surrender to the quiet, to the steady rhythm of your breath, and drift softly into sleep. Good night.